So welcome everybody to this day-long adventure into the world of R and RStudio. Hopefully you find it an enjoyable and interesting experience. Hopefully you've also achieved the first goal of this workshop, which is to get R installed, get RStudio installed, and learn a bit about getting some packages installed onto your computer. So I think that can be the first hurdle of sort of using R and RStudio if you haven't already done so. It's getting used to this, this open source mindset. This open source mindset where you've got to get additional packages and so on. If you've still got issues, there will be plenty of times where we can come around and sort of install additional packages and so on. To start with, I'm just going to go through a few just background slides on R and RStudio in general, and then we'll move into some introductory scripts. So basically the structure of today is there's 4 sessions, each is about an hour and a half. We'll then have small breaks for morning tea, afternoon tea, and 45-minute break for lunch. So in terms of the aims of the workshop, I guess it's about getting you started with R, if you haven't already used R, installing R, learning how to install packages and so on. The aim of the workshop is to get a sense of what R can do. What can it do? What can you what kind of statistical functionality can it do? How would it fit into your workflow? What kind of graphing tools does it offer? And so on. Hopefully it gives you a sense, with a day with R, you can get a sense of whether it's the right tool for you, either as an occasional thing that you dip into for specific functionality, or whether it's a tool that you want to use as your main data analysis language, or maybe you'll get out of this workshop that R is just not the type of tool that you want. So either way, I guess that's one of the aims. In terms of the main structure, we're going to be starting with looking at how the language works, then looking at probably the 2 core activities that cover all data analysis, and that's data manipulation and graphing. So those 2 roles of data analysis is something that probably covers every type of data analysis. In the second half, it's going to get a bit more sophisticated, I suppose. We'll be looking at multiple regression as an example of typical modeling tools you can use R for, and then exploring and just sort of demonstrating the functionality through a range of other more advanced things that you can do, more as an illustration to motivate you about what you might want to use R for. And in the final session, we'll be looking at how to create documents that include statistical output weaved in, like using guitar, and also how to organize the data analysis project. That's... In terms of the format of today, I've got a few slides now, and there'll be a little bit of slides later on, but most of it will be working through scripts in RStudio and sort of demonstrating what the code does, what kind of functionality it provides. At various points there'll be exercises for 5-10 minutes where you can apply some of these ideas, and Sarah and I will be sort of roaming the room to, if you have any questions. All the exercises have an exercise block and then an answer block below, so you can cheat, so to speak, and look up the answers. Struggling with the ideas, I guess. Try to apply the ideas to get some experience with the concepts. I thought I might just ask quickly at the start, because we've got quite an eclectic audience of people from both academic and a range of organisations. I'm just curious about, at the moment, what your dominant tool is. I'm assuming you're all kind of analysing data with something at the moment. Well, maybe I should be analysing R or learn about R. Who here is using SPSS as their main tool? Yeah. Is Stata? Is that what people use? Oh, yeah, actually, a lot of Stata people. Yeah, I heard it's getting popular. SAS, is that like the main tool? Is R the main tool already for some people and they just want to learn more? Excel the main tool? I don't know. Yeah, so a bit of everything. All right, so that gives me a feel for things. So in terms of, well, what is R? When I booked this workshop, I said, oh yeah, it's the introduction to R, and the lady doing the booking said, well, just R, what is it? Like R what? No, it's just R, that's it, it's R. I guess it's similar to other programming languages in that regard, that you've got things like C and C++. These are common names for programming languages that have to have a single letter. That's nice. In terms of what R is like, in some ways it's very similar to Stata or SPSS or SAS, in the sense that it's a full-featured data analysis tool that allows you to do data manipulation, import-export data, analyze, graph, manipulate. So in that sense, you can, in theory, replace any of those other tools with R if you wanted to use R. There might be some very specific functionality that's not built into R that you have in one piece of software, but in general, it kind of can fill the place of all those general. The name itself, if you're interested, it comes from mostly from the first letter of the creators in New Zealand, Ross Ahaka and Robert Gentleman. So their names started with R, so we'll call it R. It also derives from a previous language which was actually very similar, called S, which I'm not sure if people have heard of S+, which was a commercial tool that implemented the S language. Oops. In terms of why you might want to use R, R is free, which is good if your organisation doesn't want to pay for anything, or if you're working by yourself and you've left the university environment and you no longer get free licenses. So R is free. They say R is free as in beer, and R is free as in free speech. So it doesn't cost anything to download and install R. And R is open source, so R is free as in freedom, in the sense that source code is freely available, and that might not sound like much, but it's actually quite nice sometimes you can actually see the code that was written to write a particular function, and as you get more advanced, you can modify that code easily to customize it to your purposes. So, yeah, that's quite nice. In addition, I always hate having to deal with licenses with software, so you don't have to deal with that stuff. It runs on all platforms. Perhaps one of the biggest gains is that it has a huge library of contributed packages that people around the world have written, and a lot of them are very good. There are a few that are mediocre, written by random people, but some of them are really top-notch, and they've really expanded what R can do, and they're literally growing exponentially. R is also very flexible, so you can customize it perhaps more easily than other statistical languages. And I think the exploratory approach of R can actually make data analysis quite fun once you get down to it. A few challenges of using R. It does involve writing scripts for the most part. So if you're used to menus in SPSS or Stata or whatever tool you're using, it doesn't really have that menu-driven workflow, although you can check out R Commander as a graphical user interface. It's more like a teaching tool, but it does have a little bit of that sort of, it's a very basic point-and-click overlay for R, a little bit like I guess the other thing about R is it's more interactive. The general mental model for certainly SPSS, I'm less familiar with Stata and SAS, but the idea is that you say, well, look, I want to run a regression. And so maybe you go to the Analyze menu and you find the regression bit, and you get this dialog box, and you go, okay, well, now what do I want to do? I've got some variables, so I'll plonk them in, and I say, well, yeah, and I want all this other output, like diagnostics things. So you click a bunch of things, and then you run that, and you get like 5 pages, 10 pages of output. And then you sort of go through that and cherry pick that you want for your write-up. R is a bit different. It's more like a conversation. You generally ask for specific things one at a time. So that does involve learning a bit more code, but it can be quite pleasant once you get used to it. And I think the other thing about R that can make it challenging is it has a lot of links with mental models that aren't always what everyone in the data analysis world carries with them. So in particular, if you've used Unix before, or your degree was you actually did a statistics degree as opposed to doing stats in psych or science or some other space, or if you've done any programming, then R is a lot more intuitive. A lot of the commands are similar to commands. A lot of the help files are written for sort of, statistically trained people. So on one level, if you enjoy R, you'll probably enjoy absorbing that culture, but it can be a shift at first. So yeah, hopefully you've installed R, you've installed RStudio. Throughout the day, we'll be using various add-on packages. If you've run that script to install the packages, then you'll have all them. If you haven't run that, then you'll occasionally get errors like you don't have this package. And in that case, you'll have to install it at the time. There's also a range of other tools that are occasionally helpful. I won't go into them, but particular functionality. So the idea is that, I guess, R is an open source project, and open source projects generally draw on the tools available, so they don't always reinvent the wheel. So if they want to do some particular functionality, they'll often draw on other open source software, and sometimes to use those, you need to install some other stuff. It's all free, but it's just another kind of little thing you need to worry about. We're going to be using RStudio today. I should mention briefly that there are many interfaces to R. So just to clarify, R is the engine. R does the analyses, R generates the graphs, R has all the code to run the analysis. There are all these overlays that make interacting with R more fun, more user-friendly. And RStudio is far and away the one that's getting the most development at the moment, but you can certainly explore others, and perhaps there may be cases where if you have particular interests, you might prefer other interfaces. All right, so I'm going to talk about just the exercises and files on the computer. In general, hopefully you've unzipped this, the working files, and you've got something like this this window here, some folders and files and stuff. You may want to just sort of open that up. Essentially, you've got project examples, which we'll be going through at the end of the day. They're sort of full-scale projects which give you a greater sense of how you can put it all together. We won't be looking at that for now. You've got reference cards. So these are quite nice. A lot of what we'll be covering today will be, in one way or another, drawing on these reference cards. So if you turn to the back of your handout, you'll notice you've got a bunch of reference cards. So these can be really nice when you're learning R, just to have on your desk. You could even give it a tick once you think you've memorized it or whatever. The idea is that gradually over time you sort of learn the language of R. And these are kind of like once you kind of learn a command once and know sort of how it works, but you can't remember what it is for the first few times, you can look up the reference card and gradually absorb the language. So these are kind of little cheat sheets that can make learning R a bit more user-friendly. Yeah. There's also a copy of the slides there, of course, but you've got them hopefully on your table. The main files we're going to be using for the first sort of 3/4 of the day are in this training exercises folder. So in the training exercises folder, there's probably, yep.
Sorry,
All right, so has everyone downloaded the files
the file
for the workshop? The zip file for today and unzipped it onto their computer. All right, well, I might keep going, and for anyone who hasn't got these files yet, we'll definitely have exercises in about 15 minutes where we can roam the room and make sure you've got everything sorted. So what we have here is what's called an RProj file, or an RStudio project file. So it's called Introduction to R Workshop. So if you could open that file and open RStudio, that'd be really good. And that should open up RStudio. It's the introduction to rworkshop.rproj. So if you open up that file, it should open up RStudio. And the benefits of doing that is it will open up RStudio in that folder. So the home directory will be that folder. Okay. So you should have RStudio open, and with any luck, it should be clear that from the very top, you are in that directory that had the R project file. So you should be in the directory, well, mine's called something training exercises, but yeah, you should be in that directory. And then on the right here, you should see the files in your project, or you might have a slightly different arrangement. But under files, we'll be working on this file called corelanguage.rmd. So if you click on that, it should open up. That's a little. So perhaps have a look up here at the screen to get a feel for what RStudio looks like. You can see, you may have your panes organized in different ways, but essentially you have a script pane, which has my current script. You have the console pane, which has R running in it. And so you can enter commands directly into the console. Or more commonly, you can send commands from the script window into the console. So for example, I can click run, and it will run the command that my cursor was on. So I can click run, and it sends 10 - 9 down to the console. So they're two basic kind of panes. You have a scripting window where you record all your code. You have a console window that receives that code and runs it in R. And as I say, you can either enter things into the scripting window and send it down, or you can literally type commands like that into the console directly. Okay, so they're the two basic panes, but RStudio offers a lot more. You have the file pane, and that's essentially a way of navigating files related to your project. There are many different files in R, many different scripting files. You can produce graphics. You might have data files. And And these would generally be stored in a particular folder on your computer that represents a particular project. In addition, you have a packages pane. So, as I said, one of the benefits of R is the ability to install and load additional packages. And this pane will list all those packages that are currently installed and will also allow you to easily install additional packages. If there's a checkbox to something, it also tells you whether packages are loaded. We'll also go into plotting and helping later on. There's a history pane which records all the commands that have been entered into RStudio. So you can see the basic commands I've entered already, and every time you add a new command, it just gets added to the history. So if you want to enter things in the console and then copy and paste some of this to keep for later, you can do it like that. All right, so a few other things that RStudio offers. There's a range of options for creating new file types. So if you want to create a new script, you can do that for entering new commands. And what I'll be generally using, and I'll go into this in a lot more detail later on, is what are called R Markdown files. Yeah, so this document here is what's called an R Markdown file. I'll go into what that really means in detail later on today, but the basic idea is that there's some commentary and that most of the code is inside these little chunks that begin with these triple backticks, and they're kind of grayed out. We'll get into more of the RStudio interface later, but I think I'll just get into the basics now of what kind of language features it has and how it all works.